Welcome everyone to our second episode in Narratives of Connection. I'm very honoured that we've got Mark Silver with us today as our second guest. So how are you doing, Mark?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much, Leeroy. It is an honour also to be asked, actually.
Oh, well, thank you for agreeing, and it's lovely to catch up with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure, Leeroy. Well, I'm been a social worker, I guess. It's a good point to start because I've been a social worker for over 45 years now, working mainly in aged care and disability. And so I feel very old now, so I can kind of reflect on the work I've been doing and very much interested in learning about how to engage with older adults. That's been my main kind of focus. On a personal note, um, I, um, I was born in Poland, and which has influenced my life a lot because my parents were Holocaust survivors, and I came here at the age of 7, and that's been a big reason why I'm interested in stories because I've heard lots of pretty emotional stories from their life, and that's influenced me in terms of understanding about their lives and how they've managed to overcome the difficulties they have. Um, and I've been lucky enough to recently be a grandfather, which has been a wonderful thing. And we've moved from,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you, from Melbourne to a place called Yakandanda, which is near Albury, about half an hour in Victoria. And we've lived here for a year. And little Rafi, our grandchild, is 1 year old. And it's lovely to be inside a community and to be involved in um, a really generous and very communal minded people who have done a lot of things together, and it's an honour to be part of their group. And so, from a personal and professional view, I'm now moving into an area of rural and remote sort of needs of the community and how we can respond to them and how we can actually provide a service to people who normally can't get as much service as they do within the cities.
Yeah.
So, but what's happened in the last, I guess, 11 years or so, I've been working as a founder of um, a clinic called the Wellbeing Clinic for older adults, which is part of Swinburne University, and in partnership with Professor Sunil Bar, who's a professor of psychology. And we got together really by accident. And as a lot of things happen over a cup of
Yeah.
coffee, we saw a mutual need. I saw a gap when I was working I worked for about 9.5 years with one of the big providers of um, services to older adults, and saw that there was not much in the area of emotional well-being, let alone mental health.
Yeah.
And Sunil was also interested in this area, but also in the fact that students weren't interested in aged care at all. And so we cooked up this idea of this clinic where we provide a service to older adults, but also provide a training ground for up and coming mental health practitioners. It
Yeah.
originally was psychologists, and then it was social workers and also counsellors. And so that's what we've been doing the last 11 years. We've been providing placements, meaningful placements for the students. Before COVID, they were placed within facilities and sort of let loose in a sense, being
Yeah.
part of the culture, looking at the whole way that they can influence the culture, so see people informally and formally, but also um, run groups, which I think is another area that is very a growing area. The use of groups actually to help people normalize their own experiences and provide some sort of more meaningful connection
Yeah.
and also focus on their identity. So, but during COVID, we had to change, as a lot of organisations have had to change, and we developed a national telehealth service, national telehealth counselling and support program, which is still going. So
Yeah.
anywhere in Australia, people can refer either residents within facilities or also families and staff as well. So, and we have at any one time, we probably have about 20 students, and we provide supervision for them, group supervision, and we also provide a webinar series for everyone on a fortnightly basis from November to March. So that's sort of but the other thing I think to say is stories. Stories are always been a part of my life as I started, not only at a personal level, but I consider myself a narrative therapy practitioner.
Yeah.
And I think it works very well with older adults because we decided that how we would approach older people is to invite them to share their story as an entry point. Not interested in their problem, but interested in them as people.
Yeah.
And so we start wherever they start. They tell their story, and they love telling their story. But very often, uh, with older adults, it's rare for them to have any connection with anyone for more than 15 minutes. Certainly, a professional, and most people relate to them as what's the matter, So they say my foot hurts or my leg hurts or whatever. But if you ask them, what matters to you, which is a much more deeper question,
Yeah.
then you relate to them more as a person, and they tell you really what is the matter to them. And if you relate to them in that fashion, then their problems fit in to that narrative. So that's been a kind of a style, and I've called it normative narrative therapy, which is something that I think defines the approach that our clinic takes. Um, but it's really interesting, and I've learned a lot about stories and how to help people deconstruct and reconstruct stories, which I think we owe to Michael White, the founder, who really did a lot, helped us a lot in understanding how we communicate.
Yeah. There's such valuable work and richness in the work that you're doing, and uh, obviously, it sounds like you're still very busy. Um, despite 45 years of being in the business, no, it doesn't sound like you're slowing down at all. But you mentioned not only personally, but other stories have taught you a lot in the past, obviously in your clinical practice. Can you think of any story in particular that really shaped you to where you are now, and that you really think of has influenced you greatly?
Yeah, look, there's lots of stories, and I think one that comes to mind, which might help you understand the power of groups and help me understand the power of groups. I started a men's carers group, which I was running for 10 years, and it's not many groups for men. Um, and I really thought initially, it'll be, one of these groups that, you tell people how to negotiate, provide a bit of a roadmap for people and just support people. But I didn't know about love, and I didn't know how much love there is with couples, especially with dementia.
Mm,
These are men who didn't consider themselves as carers. Carers was I thought is a term that I used, but it wasn't a term that they used. I mean, they said this is just normal. Like, well, of
mm,
course I look after my wife. Of course I do this. And the amount of love that was there was palpable, and the stories of people who saw the people that they love change in personality and behavior. Sometimes they didn't recognize them, but yet they still were there. I mean, I remember one person who, he was a professor actually of literature, and his wife um, was really, he described her that she had an empty shell. Yet there were times like he'd play music to her every time he'd visit, and there were glimpses of a smile or a touch on his shoulder, And that kept him going because that was something that he held on to. And she said, look, even though um, she's a shell of a person that I know, I still see the beauty in her all these years later. And
Mm.
that's the kind of um, power, I guess, of the love and stories that I've heard a lot. And what happened to me with my hat, um, which I'm wearing, is um, there are, I don't know why, I just started wearing a hat at work, as you do, probably to hide my bald spots. And, and this other person, we got on, somehow you just click with people, you don't know why, there's this chemistry. And this wonderful person who was looking after his wife with dementia, and he told me the story with tears in his eyes of, how when he lied about his age when he was 17 and he went to the Navy and he worked on, well, he was a gunner on the HMS Australia. And we got on really, really well. And he gave me a badge.
Mm.
And I thought, well, thanks for the badge. I didn't really think that much of it. And I came to the group the next time and he said, where's your badge? And I felt really low and really terrible. And so I put it on my hat
Mm.
and he smiled. And, that was a kind of recognition of this special relationship we had, but also of his courage because he saw a lot of people die. Obviously, there was the first kamikaze attacks and things like that. And so he
Yeah.
had PTSD, obviously, that was undiagnosed. And, he really was a very deep, his emotions were very deep. And I think that's the other thing with the men that, you know, they don't get a chance to express their deep emotions. And I think in this group, once one person uh, was able to express himself at a deep level, the others followed. And I think they discovered how important it was for them to share. We didn't solve very much. We didn't fix things. And that's the other kind of thing that I learned, I think, that you don't have to fix things, but you have to listen and you have to acknowledge. And it's almost like your personal suffering becomes part of the human condition, the human angst. And that's enough sometimes to heal. And I think these are the sort of things I learned from people. And of course, with the hat, I managed to put on other badges as I came across other stories and other people as well. Another story, just to tell you the power of hope, because that's the other thing that I think if any one of us work in this area, it's the mystery of how you maintain hope in situations where there's lots of despair and you wonder, well, why is this happening to me? Why not some, what's going on? Why all of a sudden my life has changed from left field? All those sort of things. And it was a Holocaust survivor who had dementia who I got on very, very well with. And she told me the story. She was 15 when she was in a concentration camp. And there was this woman who had a tiny little bit of bread. It was a tiny bit of bread. And she gave her half. And, you know, that story, that kept her alive. She said that was the one bit of humanity, the one bit of kindness in this hellhole kept her going. And I think they're the sort of things that we look for things to cling to. We look for things. And I think we can help people do that by helping people share their story and bring in bits of it where there's hope and slow it down, help them reconstruct their story in a way where hope balances the trauma they've been through. So it's kind of for every story of trauma, there's also a story of survival. And I think once we understand that duality of experience, we then, it's a good way of us helping someone restory their story so that when they're telling the story again, they're giving a bit more to the story of survival and the story of hope. And they're the sort of techniques I think that I've learned from the stories that I've come across over the years and also through narrative therapy. Michael White has been a big influence on me and his ideas about separating the person from the problem and also bearing witness and all those sorts of wonderful gems that help us find a way of helping people through the emotions and into some sort of way that they can adjust, and some way of keeping going through
Yeah.
very difficult things.
And obviously, your own personal connection to the Holocaust uh, is something that's driven you in a lot of the work you've done. I know that you have also done some work recording some of those stories from other people from the Holocaust. How did you get into doing that?
Well, yeah, it was always an interest of mine to record stories. There's a big program with the Holocaust Centre in Melbourne to record
Yeah,
stories, which I volunteered at. And then there was a great project with Steven Spielberg
yeah,
called Shoah is the Hebrew word for Holocaust. And he decided to, in the end, he recorded 32,000 testimonies around the
wow,
world. But his primary goal was to record the history to make sure that it wasn't forgotten.
yeah,
And I was a volunteer videographer for that project, and I interviewed people, and I realized the power of stories. Not only the need to actually capture the history, but also the transformative nature of them actually telling the story, but also people listening to the story,
mm,
sometimes for the very, very first time. And by inviting them to tell their story, they they did amazing things like pay tribute to strangers. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? To pay a tribute to someone who you've never met, who sorry, you met but you don't know their name, you don't
mm,
know really much about their life, and there's through and through there's this uh, opportunity now for people to pay tribute to the humanity that lay before them. I'll give you one example of actually it was my uncle who left the camps of in Siberia. Um, was liberated, and he was completely lost at the age of 19. He was just didn't know where to go, and he tells the story of this babushka, this Russian woman who saw him in the street and beckoned him to come in and fed him and looked after him for a while. He still didn't know her name. He didn't know why she did that to a total stranger. But as he was leaving, she said to him, I wish my son's in the front, and I wish through helping you that maybe there'll be another mother who'll help my son. And
mm,
those beautiful, moving stories, and just listening to how they managed to, come to Australia and, discover another life. How can they maintain hope? You know, out of all the people that I've met, there was not, one would expect hatred and bitterness, but it's very, very few of that. There was this, if anything, there was a appreciation of life. There was
mm,
a really this sort of wanting to transmit how to maintain for the younger generation how to hang on to hope and life. And I think that's what I've learned a lot from my parents and from a lot of the generation that they came. They really can teach us all about how to live a life and how to overcome adversity. When you hear those stories, you think whatever's come your way uh, can't compare. You think,
that's right.
and that's probably one of the things to learn is the perspective. And I think um, we all need to do that. We need to have our own problems and issues in some sort of perspective of the higher value of life, I guess,
Yeah,
and what people go through.
and I mean these small acts of kindness are littered throughout society, but they're not necessarily recognized more broadly. I mean, certainly within hospital setting, healthcare setting, and certainly within aged care, we can see these elements. Um, but when we think about society, we often get this perspective that society has become less um, humane in those sorts of ways. And do you think that's a, a, a true statement? Do you think that you because we're in the position where we get to see these little acts of kindness and we hear about them. And I often sort of wonder whether the perception about how society is going is true. What do you think?
Yeah. I think humanizing our health services, I think, is a goal for everybody. I used to when I was a young social worker, I used to think that us social workers were the only ones that could do that. But I grew up and realized that we're only one small part, and we've got beautiful people in the health system who really do want to do that, and it's being able to there's a book I'm sure that you've read, Leeroy, called The Best You Can. And it was a wonderful guy in New York who worked in palliative care, and I met him here. And he wrote a book and he said, look, no matter what you're given, whether someone's got 15 minutes to live or half an hour or whatever, all you can do is make sure that you do the best you can at that time that's given to you, that you give someone all your attention, all the things you can do with all your skills, given the limitations of everything else. And I think that's a real lesson as well. If you can do that, then you at least can go some way to contribute to kindness. And it's really, I think, working within the realities of our limitations to try and keep a focus. And I think the focus is really on very basic things like humanity, giving people dignity, um, control over their lives, all those basic things that we know as in an espoused theory, but it's not easy to make it real within the pressures of the framework that we have within the managerialism of our health system, our medicalisation of problems. Um, we do need to sort of maintain the humanity. And it's really, I think, stories are a key, I think, because the more we know about someone, the better we can we understand maybe their behavior, because we know that behavior is a form of communication, and the more we know about someone, we might be able to understand why they're doing something that might appear odd. um, but it's also so I think I would encourage, I think, anybody in the health system to know as much as you can about the person. Uh, the context matters completely. Who they were, what they did, what their history was, what their values are. Because I think a lot of certainly in the mental health field, a lot of the issues that happen are the disconnection between people and their values. They basically feel completely disconnected with what used to make them happy or what used to keep them going. And I think one of the things we can do is help people reconnect with those values. So we really need a whole team to be aware of those basic principles, I think, of stories. We we do a lot of work in digital stories. We invite undergraduates to spend a year with someone on a volunteer basis to do a story
Yeah,
with someone. We also do a lot of intergenerational work. That's been a love of mine for at least the last 15 years. And it is amazing to have communication between the young and the old around stories,
yeah,
learning from each other. Um, and it was interesting during COVID, we do a lot of work with young school kids, at high school, and they were getting really despondent and depressed and really, really kind of wondering, what's life worth? If this is going to be my future,
yeah,
it seemed like it was going to be forever. But when they met the oldies, they were saying, "Don't worry, we've been through wars, we've been through fire, we've been through all these things,
yeah,
and don't worry, we'll be okay. We were okay, and we all, some of us learned a lot from those times." And so that was a wonderful message of hope that the older adults were able um, to kind of bring to the attention of the young people again about perspective, that they could see a
yeah,
perspective of some sort of meaning in their experience, because it is this search for meaning again that humanizes us. And I think one of the problems in aged care is that we've lost uh, the understanding that older adults especially need meaning and purpose in their life, and they need to feel that they're contributing. That a lot of joy isn't about your own happiness; it's about doing something for the community or doing something for others.
Yeah,
And when you're reduced, as we do, we reduce our older adults to instead of having multi-stories, because we all are multi-storied people. We have so many things in our lives. We're reduced to one story, being old or having Parkinson's or whatever it is, and being in a residential facility. And imagine if you're a person who's been a farmer and been a teacher or been, you know, a mother of 10 children or whatever, have these roles in life, and then all of a sudden you're reduced to the interaction with others to say, "How can I help you, dear?" And that's you're reduced to. And
yeah,
look, they're well-meaning. It's well-meaning. Our carers and they're well-meaning, the staff, but but they don't understand that to be reduced to would you like another cup of tea? Would you sure you don't want to go to the toilet? Can I help you adjust your pillow? Um, that is a lovely thing and a beautiful, kind thing to do. And I'm not saying that's not necessary, but
mm,
understanding that there's more to life than that, and no wonder any sense of despair or despondency or um, you know will kind of thrive in an area where you're reduced to that kind of role in life. And I think that's where the understanding we have to sort of um, get away from this siloed idea that we of age groups and um, you know, if you're a 70 or 80-year old, I mean, I'm 70, you don't want to be just mixing with 70 and 80-year-olds. I mean, who would want to do that? And for the life of me, Leroy, why do we do that? Why do
yeah,
we assume that people who are 70 and 80 want to be with people who are 70? They don't want to be. They want to be with young people. They want to be with babies. And you can see how they're anyone's seen that ABC program or the
yeah,
equivalent in England or, Old People's Home for 4-year-olds, their face lights up.
yeah,
And I always wonder, I'm obviously believe in counselling and, but when you see a little kid run full pelt into an older person's arms and who's in a wheelchair, grasping with all his
yeah,
might their hug,
yeah.
that's worth 100 counselling sessions. I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That is,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you often get people that will say, I've had enough. There's nothing to live for, and then you see the grandkids come in, and they come alive, and
mm,
you know, you often then say, well, have you told them your story? Have you had a chance to just tell them the things you've been through? And sometimes they'll say yes, they have, but most of the time they'll say no, we haven't really, and how can we do that? And then the kind of biography idea comes into it, and you then start to turn it around and say, well, when you were probably wanting to tell them things, they were teenagers and didn't want to listen, and now is a time when they probably do want to listen, but you're now saying, oh, you don't want to worry them, or et cetera, et cetera. But it's that circle of life, and it's that communication and that connection and the understanding of your roots, and like you say, allowing them to have that opportunity to express themselves and not be, like you say, treated in a certain way because of their age, but to actually be a human being that's telling stories about their lives that's really important for their family to hear, but also for us to hear. Like you say, it gives us hope, and it shows us resilience in terms of how we face our own challenges in life. So I couldn't
absolutely,
agree
yeah.
more.
Yeah, look, Leroy, absolutely. And you see that in your work. And I think, we can help um, because we can facilitate those sort of interactions by having projects, for families to actually tell a story, ask stories, um, There's an organization called StoryCorps in the States who
Yeah.
does wonderful 3-minute vignettes between relatives, which is quite beautiful. Um, but I think, I'll give you this example. We had this Bosnian student who came up to this 98-year-old lady, and and luckily she spoke Bosnian, which was terrific. And she said, oh, tell me your story. And there was this pause, and then she said, finally, someone's asking me about my story. I've been waiting for so long, and I
Yeah.
think this is true that there's this impasse, isn't there, Leroy, where the older people think no one's interested. Why would they bother? And there's also a feeling if you've had trauma, well, I don't want to. I want to protect my young people. I don't want to tell them. And how do I tell them about this trauma without
Yeah.
upsetting them?
Yeah.
And do they really want to know? Is it the young people are saying, "Oh, I don't want to ask Gran. I know she's been through a hard time. I don't want to upset her." And so it needs a sort of facilitation to give permission for that to happen, because as you say quite rightly, once it starts, you know, the older person doesn't only tell the trauma; they'll tell their survival and their trauma within the context, and
Yeah.
that's much. I think we're as a society, and I'm sure you see this. Not only are we bad at dealing with death, we're also very bad at dealing with negativity and emotions that are considered negative,
Yeah.
because we're frightened that it'll go out of hand and make people more upset and those sorts of things. So that's get all suppressed. But what we find in reality, and I'll be interested to hear from you, Leroy, about this, that in reality, when you invite people to tell, the dark side of their life, they never tell you just the dark side. It comes within the context of love and trust and respect, because they know the person at the other end and they want to present it in a way that they can understand it. And it is a complete story.
Yeah.
It is the yin and yang of it. And so once we take the risk of moving into this area, you facilitate a much deeper relationship and a much deeper connection. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you find that too in the area of when people, avoiding talking about dying and death and those things, because I think it's too horrible. Um, but I think it just says that our society doesn't do well with ageism, with stereotyping, but also around taboos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, often when I talk to people and they're talking about those darkest moments, um, you listen to the story and you can also understand that they've told themselves a story in order to deal with what has happened and their perspective on it. And as you're hearing them telling the story, the vocabulary they use or the imagery they use in how they describe it gives you a certain sense of a different perspective, and you can challenge them with that perspective to say, hang on, maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe what about, do you think it could have been this way? And then they start to reflect on it. And I had this experience only recently with a patient with chronic pain, a person with chronic pain, and we talked about a different perspective on a certain point in their life. And after a few days, you can see that they thought about it in a different way. And I've heard this so many times that it's those different perspectives, and obviously we tell ourselves stories to protect ourselves in a certain way, and then that's not necessarily the truth. If we think about our earliest experiences, they may not be the way that we have lived with them, but because we've told ourselves that's what it was. But actually, when you start to unpack it with talking to your parents or your grandparents or other people at the time, they tell you a different story that you suddenly find the context. And like you say, people will tell their stories within a context of what was happening at the time, and then you can start to really try and understand what their experience really was, and then they also can learn from that. So that's what I've found in my work.
Absolutely, Leroy. And I think in narrative therapy terms, Michael White would say that nobody tells the same story the same ever. and they're
Yeah.
influenced by the telling of the story and the reaction of the story. So it's that scaffolding of the telling and the retelling that there's not one truth. That's what you found as well.
Yeah.
There's several truths, and it's about what emphasis you place on elements of the story. And when you question someone, as you have illustrated, you can bring out other parts that they've underestimated. You can thicken, as they say, you can thicken one story, and thin another story. So when they
Yeah.
retell the story, and because of the power of the brain, one of the things that Sunil taught me was amazing. What reminiscence does. The reminiscence actually, you live that story again. Your whole brain, lights up. It's they did this experiment where there was they put a pet scan on two different groups. One was where you were just retelling a simple story about something, and the other one was you doing a memory card test, just memory
Yeah.
things. So in the memory card test, only one part of the brain was lit up, but when you were telling a story about what happened in the past, every single element of the brain lit up. So
Yeah.
you actually, when you're telling a story, you're actually reliving it, and so it's called experiential learning as opposed to verbal learning.
Yeah.
So you actually in a stage where you can actually, because you're reliving that story, you can give more emphasis to so that the memory gets imprinted through to telling of the story. So you're telling more about the survival side. But if you ask someone like, "What helped you survive that story?" You're like, "Who was it? Who was it there that? And what did they say to you?" And Michael White has some beautiful examples of when someone's telling a story about a horrible thing that happened to them in childhood, that they ran away to their neighbor, right?
Mm.
And the neighbor gave them a cup of tea, and the neighbor, really comforted them and said, "Well, tell me more about this neighbor. Why did the neighbor help you? What was it about you that that encouraged the neighbor to help you?" And so the person was started to talk about the qualities they had, and yes,
Mm.
she saw I was kind and I was a really gentle soul and everything. And so so the next time she told the story, she incorporated this element of herself, of how she survived that story, as well as the trauma. So it's that kind of work that I think has a lot more legs to it in terms of restoring. And I think the other thing that stories do, which is very powerful, is that especially with film, when someone sees themselves uh, uh, after telling a story, it's separating you, it's putting you in a position of reflecting on your own story. So it really
Yeah.
does separate the person from the issue. And so it has a tremendous healing effect, and for other people to do their story. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is do a little story about themselves. And I do that in a team or whatever, um, because when I first started to learn about digital storytelling, the Australian Centre of the Moving Image had this public course, and I came with a pen and paper, quite arrogant, thinking, because I've been doing hour stories and think, what 3 minute stories? Rubbish. You can't do anything in 3 minutes. And so the person who was running that program said, "Oh no, put away that pen and paper. You got to do your own story." And I
Yeah.
thought, my God, I do my own story. And then it it came to me because creativity comes from somewhere you don't know where it comes from. So I came home that night because it was a 3 day workshop, and I had to come up with a story the next morning. And all of a sudden, um, I came up this story. We had a brother that died in the war, and there was a photo of him up on the wall that always haunted us. We never knew him. He was 4.5. My mother always um, very much uh, every 5th of February, she'd sort of light a candle and everything, and we'd
Yeah.
remember that. Anyway, I came up with the idea of a story to Sevek. Sevek was his name, and
Mm.
so I did a whole little 3 minute story about what happened to our lives after he died to him.
Yeah.
And I learned through that personal story the therapeutic um, kind of what it can do for you when you do a story. So that was another reason what sort of I think I came into doing digital stories, and we do them now in a whole lot of different contexts. And I'm in contact with a lot of people around the world who use this medium or this genre to give voice to people who don't have a voice. And I think it's really interesting. I mentioned this. There's a group called Lived Experience Australia. I'm sure you know,
Mm.
and they have thousands of people uh, who have been clients of the mental health system or recipients of mental health services. And they did a survey recently of about 2,500 people about what is it that you get out of counselling? What is it that you expect from counselling? And I thought, obviously, fixing problems. And I said, no, it's not about fixing problems. It's about being listened to.
Mm.
It's about having a voice and being acknowledged and heard. And I think that is really a lesson for all of us to really the power of bearing witness to someone, acknowledging someone's story, and the healing nature of when you tell a story and someone it moves someone, that your story has an impact on someone else. That is a huge healing, transformative element that I don't think we understand well enough. And I think it's something that we can draw on much more because, I think we see a lot of psychologists that students that come through and it's a bit like I describe it as like a hare and the tortoise. They come in being like the hare, they want
Yeah.
10 sessions, we got to do this, someone's got depression, we'll do, a bit of CBT, a bit of ACT, a bit of mindfulness, a bit of this, a bit of that.
Yeah.
And we teach them, no, you've got to be like a tortoise. You've got to, and we know the tortoise wins in the end.
Yeah.
But so you've got to be there. You've got to listen. You've got to acknowledge. You've got to develop a relationship. You've got to, and once you do that, build up that trust. You will then hear some of the things that people have really wanted to say that never been, you know, never thought that people would understand what they've been through. And you always get this idea, my story's nothing. Like why? I had an ordinary life. I'm not special.
Mm.
And then I'm sure Leeroy, you've got millions of stories like that. And you just by listening to someone, you actually help them realize they are special. And I think, and that's the other message. In older adults, most people feel like nobodies.
Mm.
They actually feel like nobodies. And at least what we can do, the least thing that we can do is help people feel like a somebody
Yeah.
and somebody special.
Yeah.
And I think
Couldn't agree more.
that's, yeah, and I think that's probably a you know, you were talking about humanizing the health system, and I think that's probably if we only do that, even for half an hour or for whatever time people, I know you deal with people at the last end of their life, which is a real privilege to be there. Um, but even if you can, for that moment, make people feel that there's somebody's that, you know, special. And we don't do that. We just don't do that. Unfortunately, we get caught up in the minutiae of healing and, dealing with things which are important, but within a context.
Yeah. I mean, I'm often saying to people that, we are the medicine.
Mm.
And I think that people need to be seen, heard, and understood. And I think from our conversation today, you've been doing that work for a long, long time, Mark. And I want to thank you for doing that work that's much needed and continuing to do that work with the people um, who society have maybe made to feel that they're not as not as wanted or needed in society as they were before. But I think we need to bring that back to them, that they are very important to us to learn about life and to learn about how we should live our lives, and how we can be resilient to what life throws at us, but also to make them feel that they are part of our society and much valued and loved. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for the conversation today and being part of this, and sharing your story as well.
Well, Leeroy, thank you very much. And I know we haven't heard much about your work, but I'm humbled. I know a bit about your work and what you do, and it's a real honour to talk with you. And thanks for asking me.
Thanks, my pleasure. We'll catch up another time, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right,
Thanks
take
a lot.
care. Cheers.
Thanks, Leeroy. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.